More than 100 days into the so-called ceasefire in Gaza, Israeli strikes continue, killing hundreds of Palestinians. And while Donald Trump pushes a board of peace to oversee reconstruction, Palestinians remain absent from its top leadership. So what will happen to the future of Gaza and its residents? And will Palestinians have a say in their own struggle for self-determination? Joining me to discuss this is Gazan author and policy analyst Jehad Abusalim. Jehad Abusalim, thank you so much for joining me on UpFront.
Thank you so much for having me.
A lot has been happening in the news in the last few months. We have Donald Trump pushing to acquire Greenland. We have the abduction of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. We have ICE raids and immigration problems. It seems like Palestine isn't on the front pages anymore. Has the world moved on from Gaza?
Well, even if the world decides to move on from Gaza, Gaza remains a place that gets bombed every day. It's where there is near daily violence happening. Today, Israel killed 22 people in airstrikes across the Gaza Strip. More than 530 Palestinians were killed in Gaza since the ceasefire began. So even if Gaza is not making the top headlines, the situation on the ground remains one where the bloodshed continues. I mean, Israel waged this genocidal war to achieve a number of goals, some of which it was able to achieve, such as the destruction of most of the Gaza Strip, the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians there, and rendering a strip that has been considered already before the genocide by the United Nations unlivable, to make it further unlivable. However, despite the destruction, the killing, the bloodshed, Palestinians in Gaza remained on their land. They resisted and they pushed against all of these measures that Israel has been imposing on them, to the extent that the genocide has become very costly in terms of PR and in terms of Israel's reputation and standing in the world. So what happened with the ceasefire is that we switched from this large-scale, spectacular bombardment of the Gaza Strip into what Israel wants to be a low-stakes genocide.
I'm glad you mentioned ceasefire in that way in particular. A U.S. brokered ceasefire has been in place since October of 2025. And as you've talked about, since that ceasefire was brokered, we still see strikes, we still see death, we still see displacement, we still see humanitarian aid being blocked. According to one study, 99 out of the past 116 days has featured an Israeli attack on Gaza.
Yes.
Is this a ceasefire? And if so, what's changed?
What changed is the scale of the killing.
Well, first, is it fair to even call this a ceasefire?
We can call it whatever, people can call it whatever they want. The reality on the ground is that there is an agreement, and Israel violated this agreement repeatedly on a daily basis since it was signed. And this is not something new for Israel. Israel is known for Israel violates the ceasefire in Lebanon. Israel violates Syrian sovereignty. This is part of Israel's aggressive behavior. But ceasefires themselves, while they are welcome, they can pose violence, they can regulate violence. But the problem in Palestine is that we have a settler colonial entity that has an aggressive posture, that is interested in maximum land with minimum Palestinians on it, and it is doing anything it could to achieve that goal.
How is this violence that you discuss sort of justified from the Israeli perspective? In other words, when the ceasefire is broken, I've heard claims from the Israeli government that it's broken because of Palestinian aggression, because of Palestinian non-committal to the agreements. How does the Israeli state even justify, at this point, its responses?
Well, the Israelis, they don't feel obligated to justify because they have, the full support of the United States. and whether they justify or not, and they use these excuses, but we all know that they're not rooted in reality. We all know that even when they cite some sort of violation that they allege that happened on the Palestinian side, their responses are too aggressive and violent. Today they bombed tents in Gaza and killed children. What does that have to do with whatever justifications they're using? This is just killing for the sake of killing. It's killing for the sake of asserting Israeli dominance and control, and to show that Israel can always escape accountability, because there is no structure for accountability yet.
What would accountability look like?
Accountability would look like, looking at the crimes that Israel has committed throughout the past decades, and holding not just individuals but also structures accountable. How do these structures keep producing inequality, injustice, loss of life, the collective punishment, depriving Palestinians of their rights and dignity? This is the reality on the ground. Accountability means a process, and we have a lot of capable institutions and individuals who can come together and come up with a process to ensure that this structure that exists, this structure that kills people, can be dismantled, and for a new vision for justice to be created.
It's interesting that you say that there are these institutions that are capable of handling this, because in the minds of many, there aren't. The UN Security Council hasn't been helpful. The ICC hasn't been helpful. The ICJ hasn't been helpful in many ways. Not to say that they haven't articulated principled positions at times, but that in terms of having teeth, in terms of actually producing the accountability that you're asking for, one could look at the outcome and say we don't have the international institutions to manage this.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, the international legal institutions have reached conclusions about Israel's behavior before and during the genocide.
Yeah.
But their ability to push for accountability, of course, is derived from the states that like big states like the United States. We think about the Security Council. If change does not happen within these states, if the populations of a place like the United States isn't pushing for accountability on this issue, if this issue doesn't become one that politicians here in the United States can think twice before continuing this unchecked support for Israel, this will hopefully translate into larger changes that can impact the role these institutions can play.
One of the scary outcomes is that you go from a problematic UN Security Council, or United Nations more broadly, to an even more flawed and problematic Trump Board of Peace. In the aftermath of the so-called war, what many of us refer to as genocide, Donald Trump says, hey, I'm going to construct a board of peace to decide the future of Gaza. Tony Blair's on it. Benjamin Netanyahu's on it. What it doesn't include among the senior top leadership is Palestinians.
Yeah.
There's multiple problems with that. But the first question I have for you about that is, are we seeing a kind of move to make the UN obsolete, but also to move to an even less democratic, maybe even anti-democratic mechanism?
I agree with you. I think the UN has been on the path of being rendered obsolete for a long time, and Palestine is one of those areas where the UN has consistently failed, not because the UN employees or the human rights workers or international staff of these international agencies don't want to push for change, but as you mentioned, the US has the veto power, and Israel enjoys this immense level of lack of accountability, which allows it to behave the way it behaves. And I think the UN has been put on a path of always being looked at as an institution that doesn't have the credibility nor the ability to hold aggressors accountable and to put them in check. And I think Gaza was a catalyst for a reckoning with this question. Is the UN actually a cover for big states to pass the agendas that they want, or is it an institution with promise? And I think we're reaching that moment now. As you mentioned, we don't know if the alternative will be better.
Do you have any doubt that the alternative, if it's the Trump Board of Peace, would be worse?
I mean, I know what I know about the Board of Peace now is that for me as a Palestinian, it represents continuity in the sense that Palestinians have always struggled with visions and schemes and plans and frameworks that claimed that they would be capable of resolving the Palestine question. But the most important thing that matters for Palestinians, which is their political agency, their political rights, and being seen and recognized as partners in shaping their fate and also in shaping the country and the region where they live. So it reproduces the same old dynamic where Palestinians are looked at as a humanitarian issue or an economic problem, but not as political subjects with rights who have the right to live in dignity but also decide their fate. This is a structure that is coming and is working on producing a vision that it sees, that it deems suitable, but where are Palestinians in this equation?
Well, they're certainly not in the leadership of the Board of Peace. I mean, there's literally no Palestinians on there. How does one even in 2026 get away with that?
This is a mechanism that's meant to protect Israel even from itself, in the sense that Israel has unleashed this aggressive, bloody genocide, killed tens of thousands of people, and was pushing to displace Palestinians and expel them from the Gaza Strip. And it succeeded in some of these goals and it failed in others. But the political reality has become so untenable. Israel has been losing the PR battle. Israel has been, has become a hated entity around the world. No amount of propaganda coming from pro-Israeli accounts or entities that are working on whitewashing Israeli crimes. None of this is working. So up until 2 years into the genocide, Israel was still killing more than 100 person a day, and I think from the point of view of even Israel's allies, the question was, okay, so like for how long this is going to continue, and what will this achieve if Israel, you can't wage war this way, just killing babies every day and sending out this footage of incinerated and shredded and burnt toddlers and babies. But the point of the matter here is that we have an Israel that is going rogue, and the United States is getting more and more involved, and it did so before the Board of Peace on the ground. We have American personnel on the ground, and I think this also poses questions about the changing nature of the U.S.-Israeli alliance. I think we have more U.S. involvement, and this is a question for U.S. citizens. How are they going to view this heavier involvement for their government in this question moving forward?
Early in February, Israel reopened the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt in line with the U.S. brokered plan, and it has remained open up until very, very recently, just a few days before the time of this recording. This is the first time the crossing has been open since Israel seized control in May of 2024. Now, there's ways that this is a lifeline to people. Tens of thousands of Palestinians have been waiting for medical evacuation in particular, and that includes 4,000 children who desperately need medical attention. Could be seen as a hopeful step, or this could be a push to get Palestinians out and to keep them out permanently. How do you see this development?
The Rafah crossing, even before the genocide, I personally struggled with it. It's rooted in a permission system that's connected to the reality. And of course, as I mentioned, Israel's goal remains the emptying of Gaza of its population. That goal remains. If this large-scale genocidal campaign failed at achieving it, there have been many schemes and plans that we heard about, and I'm sure there are many that we are not going to hear about anytime soon, that aim at getting as many Palestinians from Gaza out of the Gaza Strip. And the point remains, Rafah is a lifeline for Palestinians in Gaza. And whether Rafah becomes a crossing where people's dignity is not treated as something that is disposable and conditional. I mean, think about patients and wounded people who prepare to travel and then they are told, no, you can come back like 2 days from now. There's an issue with coordination. When we talk in the abstract about experiences like this, sometimes we fail at describing on an individual level, the level of pain and misery. So Rafah opened now, but it opened under the same logic that has governed how Palestinians are treated by Israel. Palestinian lives are disposable, and Palestinians will continue to be, subjected to this control regime that does not take for granted that Palestinians are human beings, with the right to travel, with the right to move, with the right to enter, with the right to exit, but take that right and use it as part of the political blackmail reality that we're suffering from.
We've spoken a lot about death, obviously. Just recently, the Israeli army has accepted the death toll numbers of the Gazan Health Ministry, saying that the number of Palestinians who have died since October 7th is somewhere around 71,000. Of course, the Gazan Health Ministry also stipulates that there are many others under the rubble who haven't been counted. But the army has accepted the 71,000 number. That's a big deal because for the last few years, they have dismissed the Gazan Health Ministry's numbers. And it's not the first time. The Israeli state, in some form or fashion, has said they're exaggerating, only to later say, hey, that number was right. How does this keep happening? How do they continue to be able to get that story off?
It's dehumanization. It's pure and simple. Before the genocide, Palestinians in Gaza, they launched campaigns that declared that they are not numbers. Palestinians were saying we are not numbers, and then the genocide happens, and even the privilege of the number itself being considered as representative of reality, Palestinians were deprived of that. So it's just it speaks to the level of dehumanization and to the level also of...
Say more about that. I mean, the media falls for the propaganda. I talk to people every day, smart people, who say, oh, that number's fake. Oh, those Gazans or those Palestinians, they exaggerate the death. Why do people continue to believe this if history keeps showing that they're right?
Because they are, as you said, they're smart, and they know that in order for this project that they support, the Israeli project that is rooted in Zionism, that is rooted in this supremacist view that this land only belongs to a specific people, where a specific language needs to be spoken, where a specific narrative about its history and about its culture should be accepted. The conclusion of this way of thinking is to deem Palestinians unworthy of life, and when they die, to deny their death. So it's a product of a racist ideology. But at the end of the day, the common thread between the openly racist and those who are, racist, like light, the common thread for them is this rejection of Palestinians, not just as a national group that has rights and roots and is connected to this land and deserves to live on it in dignity as equals, as citizens, as people with history. They also, in order for them to deny Palestinians that, they deny Palestinian humanity.
Donald Trump has talked about the United States taking over Gaza. He's been pretty open and even unapologetic about saying, we're going to make Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East. Recently at Davos, Jared Kushner unveiled a $30 billion Trump development plan for New Gaza, which included skyscrapers along its coastline and a new Rafah with 100,000 housing units, schools, and medical facilities. You're from Gaza. What's your reaction when you hear those specific plans?
Yeah, well, When I think about Gaza, I don't. For me, it's not just a place. Like it's a society. It's a social order. So when we hear these abstract plans that depict Gaza as this place that that overnight and suddenly and without any human intervention turned into this like empty plot of land that is ready for development. I keep thinking about what we lost in the past 2 years, and what we lost in the past 2 years was not just physical structures. This was the society. This was the social context where millions of people lived and died and got married and had kids and connected and buried their ancestors. So the notion that we could just accept that the land any place can be emptied and bulldozed like that without consequences and without accounting for what that land means for the people who have been dispossessed from it, and then to normalize the notion that yes, we can just build skyscrapers on top of this land and just move on. This is, for me, sets a dangerous precedent in how not just regarding Gaza, but also with regards to any capable and powerful entity in the world could do that now.
Obviously, Benjamin Netanyahu has been fairly consistent lately in saying the Palestinian state as an idea has been ruled out. Post October 7th, he's not even pretending to be moving toward Palestinian statehood in terms of endorsing it. Other countries have. France, the United Kingdom, they have recently recognized Palestinian statehood. Is that a sign of progress that states are starting to do that, particularly states who didn't before? Does that move us closer to a just resolution, just outcome?
It will only do that when these countries use their leverage to pressure Israel and to put, concrete economic pressure on the Israeli state in order for it to arrive at the same conclusion. But if they, what's the point of symbolic recognitions while they are engaged with Israel in economic dealings, and while they provide Israel's economy a lifeline during a genocide, and also continue to support Israel with military aid and military dealings with it. So symbolic recognitions are welcome, but at the end of the day, if this recognition is not followed with accountability and is not followed with putting real pressure to arrive at the political reality that this symbolic recognition hints at, then I don't think there is any value to this recognition if it remains just in the realm of the symbolic.
How hopeful are you? How likely is it that we will move from symbolic gestures and recognition to the actual realization of freedom, justice, dignity, and self-determination for the Palestinian people?
I'm cautious about using the term hope, but I am hopeful. I'm hopeful because at the end of the day, the very order that created the injustice and maintained the injustice on the ground is being questioned now. And we hear people around the world, especially in the United States and beyond, from all political backgrounds, coming to the conclusion that Israel is not a sustainable project, that the reality on the ground in Palestine needs to see a significant shift. Palestine, I don't see Palestine in a silo. I see Palestine as an issue that is connected to the reality, to the broader context of the world that we live in. So, but at the end of the day, I believe that with more pressure, with more economic pressure, and with more education, and with more awareness raising, and with more with these shifts in public opinion expanding, we will hopefully be able to put enough pressure on our elected representatives, on politicians, to make it, if they don't want to be on the moral side of this, to feel that it's even impossible for them to maintain their political careers and to lead successful political careers if they stay on the side of genocide and on the side of bloodshed and on the side of disposition. So that's my hope. That's my hope. But this is not hope that is abstract. It's hope that requires hard work and requires courage in a very difficult moment. And we'll count on people's conscience and commitment to justice to achieve that.
Indeed. Jehad Abusalim, thank you so much for joining me in UpFront.
Thank you so much for having me.